While my wife, 30, was on the way to work one day, she was listening to her favorite radio show. We both listened to it, and I, 28, was on the way to work as well, so I heard her when she was the ninth caller and winner in a contest. She made sure to mention that she was a huge fan of the radio host, and even if I didn't know her at all, I'd say she was smitten with him. Of course, I was a little angry, but I didn't bring it up with her because I thought I might be overreacting. She could have just been excited she won the contest. Of course, as her husband, I assumed she was taking me with her to the concert she won tickets to, so I was excited too. She let me keep thinking that, but in the weeks leading up to the concert, she was actually texting and visiting with the radio host, forming a relationship. One day when I thought she was at work, she was actually at the radio station for a tour and time spent one-on-one with AP. They got time completely alone in the lounge. And that's when my wife sacrificed the sanctity of our marriage. She didn't care about me. I know all this because the day before the concert, she told me what happened. She said she was leaving me for him, and taking him to the concert with her. I told her fine. I didn't want to continue our 3-year marriage anyway, knowing she slept with someone else, but she needed to get all her stuff out my house right away. She refused and told me she would do it after the concert. It really started to sink in that she was giving up our marriage for this guy, and I couldn't help but think that AP didn't know how serious she was about him. It was happening so fast. I told myself I wouldn't have time to be upset before AP dumped her, but that didn't mean I would take her back. While she was gone, I threw all her stuff out and actually put about a quarter of it into a bonfire. When she came back the next day, it wasn't to pick up her stuff, it was to try to patch things up with me. She told me she regretted what she did, and needed me to forgive her. I convinced her to tell me what was really going on, which was that AP went back to his usual life and didn't expect to have her as his girlfriend. She assumed they were starting a relationship because he slept with her, but he only saw her as a few-night stand and free concert date. Then he stopped talking to her completely. I think she expected pity from me and a second chance, but I just laughed in her face. I told her she messed up, quite obviously, and she'd better think of a way to get all her stuff off my property or I'd start using it for fire fuel. She thought I was the one being ridiculous, believe it or not, so I called over her parents and her brother, even though she didn't want them to know what she did. I told them everything, then asked them who they thought was more justified. They all sided with me. My wife couldn't believe her brother didn't think she should be forgiven. I laughed and laughed, but I think it was part hysteria. Her family mentioned that they had no interest in speaking to her for the time being. I then found out that she started harassing the radio host. Then she found out where he lived. She was arrested and he got a restraining order against her. I think she was losing it because she realized she gave up our marriage for this guy, and all he did was use her. I think that's pretty good karmic effect right there. She left me like I was worthless, and I meant nothing that he gave her up the same way. My wife continued having pointless relationships like that for years to come. After she married me, she couldn't find a second chance at marriage, no matter how bad she wanted it. I was glad it seemed like men were somehow sensing she was bad news. Turns out there's a reason for it. The radio host talked about her and told anyone who listened to avoid her. She became almost like a Karen-type celebrity, known for being someone you wouldn't want to get close to. I knew I deserved a better wife and spouse than that. OP, I am sorry your wife gave herself away so easily, not very long after committing herself to you for life. It seems she's far from mature enough to understand what it means to commit to someone and actually follow through with vows of loyalty. She behaved like a disposable party girl to that radio host, and he knew that's all she was good for. Some lessons in life come unexpectedly, but you handled yourself really well in this case. You knew you had to divorce her, even though you expected to have your life with this woman. Anytime you'd be with her, you'd think of what she did behind your back and how she gave you up. I hope anyone going through something similar would find the strength within them to stand up and separate themselves from the cheater just as you did. Any woman should know that she's only deserving of the commitment and respect she gives to the men she's had in her life. You have such good common sense, and I know you'll find and keep a good relationship with someone else. Never let a cheater think they can walk all over you. Now let's get on to our second story for today. My wife, 26 female, and I, 27 male, weren't very fond of social media. Our relationship was very simple and pleasant. We didn't get caught up worrying about stuff that didn't matter, and we never compared our lives to others. We were married for 4 years, and the only platform she started using was Google Docs for work. She was really good at helping people and enjoyed writing articles to do with relationships or pretty much any other life question. I didn't know, but she started talking to a man daily without even having to log into a social account. My wife had a contact that worked with her on a few different things. When she decided to talk to him about the sexual fantasies she wanted him to fulfill, she knew she couldn't afford to get caught. She largely depended on my income to survive. She was careful to never have anything incriminating on her phone. She knew that was one of the most common things people used to cheat, so she was always very open with it. She would leave it unlocked on the counter, or I'd find it sitting beside me on the couch. She spent time on her computer, but it always seemed like she was working because the main thing she had open was whatever document she was working on. Our sleep schedule randomly started to change. I fell asleep earlier while she stayed up late. This went on for 2 weeks, even though I wanted it to stop, and I was trying to stay up later. One night, my wife dropped something, and it scared me awake. I pretended to fall back asleep quickly so I could listen to what she was doing. I peeked at her computer when she got back on it, and it was a document as usual, but this time I was close enough that I could see there were two different colored text cursors, and she would laugh and giggle every now and then. Then I heard something hit our window. It sounded like a small pebble. Couldn't believe it. I held my breath while my wife opened the window and started whispering that whoever it was shouldn't be there. She closed the window quietly and snuck outside. I followed behind her after about 30 seconds. I watched from around the corner as she spoke with some man. I had no idea how or why this was happening. They talked for 15 whole minutes, but I couldn't hear anything from where I was. So I went back inside to look at her laptop. I read what turned out to be a chat between two people where my wife told him what she wanted him to do to her. She just didn't count on him showing up outside her window. When I heard the door opening, I bolted back into bed and my wife closed the bedroom door as quietly as possible. I didn't believe there was any way she'd sleep with the man. Not while I was sleeping under the same roof. I got down on the floor by the cracks so I could watch. I could just barely see the couch. I saw their pants drop on the floor and both their legs disappeared. I heard AP ask about going into the bedroom, but she just said it was a cluttered mess. I didn't think of grabbing my phone to record. I just threw the door open. My wife screamed and the guy tripped out the door without his pants. As he ran, I yelled after him to ask how he knew my wife. He didn't answer. I went back inside and asked her how freaking stupid she could possibly be. I stared at her in disbelief. She said she was really sorry and explained that he was her writing partner and he just showed up without permission. She felt bad for him and let him in to hang out, but he was the one that made her take off her pants. I told her I was watching them when they got to the couch and their pants came off simultaneously. I also knew what her computer said and that she was going to extreme lengths to hide her affair. Plus, she must have told him where she lived, expecting or wanting him to show up. I asked her why she told him her fantasies and if I wasn't good enough. She didn't know what to say and only looked a little sad like I stubbed my toe. She said she still loved me and asked if we could go to bed and talk about it in the morning. I freaked out asking how she could still love me if she was sleeping with someone else. I told her I was absolutely not going to bed with her ever again, and it wasn't until I said that she was finally starting to see how bad this was. When I told her she needed to leave, she was shocked. She asked if she could just write me a coupon to sleep with another woman. There was no way that was a healthy solution and I'd honestly never consider it, but I wanted to see how she'd react if I took it, so I said yes. She was surprised and smiled weakly. She wrote me one and I turned it into her right away saying I wanted to sleep with her best friend Jess. She was shocked and started questioning if I had feelings for her all along or what. I asked why it mattered if she had the gall to sleep with AP right under my nose as I slept in the other room. It looked like she was finally starting to see this from my perspective. She apologized more sincerely, but I told her I didn't want her apology. The fact that she didn't consider me or know how important her loyalty was disturbed me beyond repair. I asked her if she ever slept with someone else without my knowledge, and she looked away. I instantly knew she had. She confessed to sleeping with someone she met at the grocery store. I could not believe this. I told her she was a stupid waste of time and I hated her. I packed my bags and left. I drove to her friend's house because she had already confessed her feelings to me months before, but I never spoke to her because I was serious about my wife. After I got in her bed, I called my lawyer. My wife showed up to her friend's house 3 days later, losing her mind because she wanted me back. I could hear her yelling at Jess downstairs to let her in so she could tell me what she needed to say. I came down to prevent it from escalating. She told me that she didn't realize how important and irreplaceable I was to her, that no sideman could replace the love I gave to her on a daily basis. I was pretty sarcastic and heartless even when she started crying so hard her lip trembled. I didn't feel anything for her once I knew she slept around. By the time our divorce was final, I had moved in with Jess, and my life has been much better ever since. I can't believe how sleazy your wife was by telling her writing coworker her fantasies where she lived and failing to mention she was married. Then actually bringing him in the house as you slept for no other reason than to have sex right under your nose. Then, on top of all that, she admits to sleeping with another man in the past. She's a lousy excuse for a wife. With her given record, she does not deserve to have a man commit himself to her. Is it so hard to accept that a woman must earn the respect and care that a man gives her every day? A woman should never feel like she deserves to be treated like a queen unless she's treating her man and no other like a king. Not only that, any friendship or communication with other men should be open and free for her husband to read or know about. It's not about whether your spouse trusts you or not, it's about having honesty and transparency in the relationship. Your spouse should know about everyone you know because you're a team that has made a commitment to each other. I know you did the right thing by divorcing this woman. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today. My wife and I were married for 8 years by the time all this happened. She was the 4th grade math teacher at the local middle school. The principal of the school worked with her for 9 years, and they were good friends. I always trusted them and believed their relationship was strictly professional. My wife was a teacher for so long, I never expected her to do anything to jeopardize her career. Maybe she didn't think anyone would ever find out what she was doing, but that's a stupid thing to believe. She forgot her phone one day while she was at work, and I found it in the couch cushions. Although I didn't expect to find anything interesting at all, I started snooping through her phone. I found messages from the principal to her. That wouldn't have been very weird, but I only scrolled a little bit before the conversation took a naughty turn. She'd sent him a picture showing things that were only meant for my eyes. The picture was after he asked her if she was feeling hot for him. The part that broke my heart the most was when he mentioned how wonderful her body felt. The principal was a married man, which made it even more appalling. Their messages went back for a long time. I couldn't even determine when their message chain started. There was a lot of steamy talk that pissed me off so badly. I had enough reading and decided to call Mrs. Principal. She was really confused to hear from me, but I explained I was the husband of the 4th grade teacher at the school where her husband is the principal. She wanted to know why I was calling. This was the hard part. I stuttered and tried to find the words, but I eventually told her I found messages on my wife's phone from her husband. Then I added that the messages implied they had sexual relations. She gasped and started choking on her words while she asked me questions. Eventually, I just told her I would send her screenshots of the proof and her phone number. After she read through a lot of them, she told me she was going to call the vice principal and local superintendent. I braced myself. My wife was going to be in serious trouble. In one day, she lost her career and husband. I felt bad for her and me, but I only felt bad for her because I cared about her deeply for a long time up to this point. Who knows how long she hid this from me? I know I certainly didn't deserve it. I remembered my mom convinced me to do a prenup before my wife and I got married, and now I was relieved. It just ensured I would get to keep the house. As soon as I thought about this, I got the first panic text from my wife. She said something weird was happening and she needed to call me in a few minutes. I didn't reply, but it took her 45 minutes to call me. She was crying and I could hear people talking in the background. She said she was called into the meeting room and fired for having too close of a relationship with the principal. I didn't respond too quickly because she wasn't being completely honest with me. I just asked if the principal was fired too, and she said yes. I asked her what kind of relationship they had, and she went silent. She finally asked me if I found her phone. After I said yes, lots of silence followed. That's when I was done playing dumb and told her I found all the messages between the two of them and that she needed to move out of the house today because it belongs to me. I told her that this was all her fault, she did this to us, and now she would have to live out the consequences in her life. She sobbed and told me she was so sorry among other promises and anything she could say to try to keep me on the phone. She thought she could use the hook she had in my heart to convince me to stay. She was wrong. I was my own support and nirvana. I didn't need her to function or have a good life. I was not afraid of facing the challenge she hit me with. I didn't need to save her from suffering from the pain either. I had these thoughts as she was rambling over the phone. I told her to shut up and that she needed to come pack up her stuff. I also warned her that if anything was left behind when I got back, it was mine and she wouldn't be allowed back in. I had really inspiring and supportive conversations with my friend at his house while my wife's world crumbled around her. Her and the principal were homeless and jobless now. His wife kicked him out of the house immediately and he got fired from his job. The whole town knew about their affair, so they instantly gained a reputation as being homewreckers. Last I heard of them is that they both had to move out of state to avoid the aftermath of the disaster they had created. Not a day goes by where I reconsider my decision to leave my ex. The first few nights were hard, but I just absorbed my mind in the things I enjoy the most. My hobby is building model trains and miniature scenery. It is extremely fun and time-consuming. Before I realized it, I had become a sought-after bachelor in town and started dating. I'm still taking things slowly to heal mentally from what I've been through, but since the incident happened, I have experienced some casual relationships with women in my area. Overall, things have turned out pretty great, and I want people to know that leaving a cheating spouse is not as scary as it seems. Wow, OP. I am so sorry you had to experience the surprise betrayal of your wife of 8 years. No one should have to experience this. It is a shame that it happens relatively often in today's world. It's no secret that families are intended to be permanent and survive all trials and temptations together. Your wife was tempted by something that could only benefit her, so I believe you made a reasonable decision to start over. Your story offers hope to our viewers, and I thank you for sharing. I wish you all the best. Now for today's second story. This actually happened to me, and it makes me believe karma is real. I married my wife when I was 24 and she was 28. She had a boyfriend that was in prison for 5 years by the time we got married. For obvious reasons, I assumed that they were broken up without any chance of ever seeing each other again. She didn't tell me that they'd been writing each other letters and talking on the phone every week since he was locked up. She also never told me that he was scheduled to be released on her second wedding anniversary. I know she knew about it because she made up an excuse to leave the house alone that night. She went so far as to fake a phone call with her mom claiming they needed help to move something heavy. I was a fool for believing her without question. I let her go that night without knowing that she was his ride to where he was staying. She was gone for an hour and a half, which just felt way too long to be helping her parents move something at their house 5 minutes away. I called her just as she walked in the door. She looked very pleased and amused. I asked her how it went, and it took her a few seconds to remember what excuse she gave me. She finally said, "Oh yeah, it went great. It wasn't really that heavy. I think they just wanted to see me." I asked what they talked about and she just looked at me like that was a weird question. I stared at her expectantly, like it shouldn't be hard for her to answer if she was telling me the truth. She started sweating and stammering. She made up something, but her improv wasn't convincing. Then she went off to bed, giving me a lame excuse on our anniversary night. I hate to say it, but her sneaking away went on for another 3 months. She acted so happy while she was at home. It made me think everything was great between us. We even had wonderful sex, which bothers me a lot now that I know what was going on behind my back. Everything started falling apart when she told me she was pregnant. I didn't believe it was possible because almost every time we had sex she made me use a condom. Funny, she was making her husband use a condom while she had unprotected sex with her felon boyfriend. Now I believe she wanted to get pregnant by him, so she could leave me for him and guarantee that he would stay with her. Well, her plan backfired. As soon as it was possible, I had a DNA test done on the child. She tried to resist the idea at the doctor's office, but quickly realized that made it look like she was hiding something. The DNA test came back, and surprise, I was not the father. Now get this, she had the nerve to tell me that DNA tests can be wrong. So while we waited for the second test results, I made her stay at her parents' house. She absolutely hated this. I think she hated it because she tried to move in with her baby daddy and he wouldn't let her. Her parents didn't know anything was up yet, but they wouldn't be in the dark for much longer. I knew she wasn't just going to stop visiting her secret lover, so it was time to follow her. I sat in my running car down the street from her parents' house in 0-degree weather. She got in her car around 9:45 p.m. I followed her at a distance but relied heavily on the family location app she forgot she had on her phone. She went inside a house with loud music blasting from it. I don't know how many people were in there, but after 8 minutes I felt brave enough and determined enough to sneak up to the windows. I peeked in and saw several people mingling around. I found a bedroom, but I couldn't see very well through the window. I swore I could hear my wife, but the music was so loud that I couldn't be sure or record it. I went back to the car and waited until she came outside 39 minutes later. I snapped a picture of him saying goodbye to her, but it was really poor quality. I thought it was really sad that he was obviously just using her and she wasn't welcome to stay much longer than what was necessary. I filed for divorce before the test results came. When her parents saw their pregnant daughter being served divorce papers at their door, they started shitting bricks. My wife was kicked out shortly after that. Her cries and attempts to explain why this was happening just didn't make sense to her parents. They knew she must have had a secret lover who would take her in if she had nowhere else to go. They were right. After they kicked her out, she was picked up immediately by her felon baby daddy. I watched her social media during and shortly after our divorce, and whenever she posted pictures of the baby or her and her baby daddy, the house looked absolutely filthy. She stayed there until their baby was 3 weeks old. That's when she walked in on him having sex with another woman. My ex absolutely broke down at that point. She stopped caring for the baby and was taken to a mental health facility to recover. The felon baby daddy wasn't that great at caring for a child on his own, so the baby was taken into Child Protective Services shortly after that. It's been 1 year since all of this happened, and my ex is still in the meadows. When she was first admitted, she would try to call me at least once a day and leave a voicemail full of apologies and tears. Sometimes I answered, but our conversations were so awkward and empty. There was no way she was going to win me back at this point. She had destroyed the life and trust we built together. Eventually she stopped calling me, and all I know is that she hasn't been released yet. I have yet to begin dating again. I feel so relieved to have gotten a chance to recover from the emotional destruction she caused me. I'm building a relationship with myself. I didn't realize it until after I was single again, but I was living each day hating things about myself. That's what I started working on after I left my wife. Self-improvement and self-acceptance. I'm the only one that's going to be there for me through everything I encounter in life. I'm grateful for my dad and the few friends I have in this world. They helped me through the hard times and abrupt changes. OP, your story is quite shocking. I read a lot of these stories, but I'm always surprised when a wife manages to hide a secret relationship from her husband. I'm so sorry you had to endure the emotional torment that accompanies marital betrayal. Your wife made a terrible and selfish decision to have an affair with a felon. Clearly her life was much better while she was married to you. I feel like her decision to stoop so low is a reflection of how she sees herself. Unworthy and seeking approval from anyone. I am happy to hear how you handled it, and hope that people going through a similar situation stay strong and follow your example. Stay strong, OP. Thank you all for the support and for taking the time to listen to